Okay, so I thought that I would use this video to address a misconception in the New Age community in which many believe that they do not have a responsibility to speak out against evil. In fact, I had an interaction with a person who follows these New Age beliefs, and this person basically told me that good and evil are the same thing, and due to everything being a part of the divine plan, they don't have a responsibility to speak out against evil, and they don't have any ill will towards the Jesuits because the Jesuits and their evil and their behavior is all just part of the grand design, and therefore they do not have to basically speak out about the negative behavior of the Jesuits. They do not have to speak out in a way that they give a voice to those who are suffering because of the negative behavior being enacted by those who have taken power and those who have basically used our governments and our religious organisations as a way to oppress us and a way to hide their true intentions behind. And so I thought that I would use this video as a way to respond to this person's misconceptions and misunderstanding of the Hermetic principle of polarity. Unfortunately, when I went to engage in discussion with this person, I was basically just insulted, and the discussion was reduced to a personal attack on me because they did not actually like the information that was provided to them. And so what I will do is use the information from the esoteric knowledge, from the actual scriptures, and from philosophers and students of the esoteric knowledge, and teachers of the esoteric knowledge, to basically show that yes, we do have a responsibility to speak out against evil and to basically not just stand by as menials, because when we actually stand by as menials and do nothing, then evil just flourishes, and we are actually complicit in evil, and we are complicit in allowing evil to flourish. And so this misconception in the New Age community is one that is very attractive because basically they believe they can just meditate anything that's negative away, and they'll just think about it and meditate about it and it'll just disappear magically. There is nothing that backs up this belief in any of the Hermetic texts or any of the scriptures. Basically, what we're taught is cause and effect. Everything needs to be acted on. So everything starts as thought, but then it needs to be acted on. And so we can look at this as corresponding to our third eye, which corresponds to thought. And then we can also look at this corresponding to our throat chakra, our fifth chakra, which corresponds to cause and effect. And so we have to act on thought. And then when we act on thought, we can change our physical environment. When it just stays a thought, then we don't actually change anything. We just basically exist in belief. And this is what a lot in the New Age community actually do. Now, I know that this information will trigger quite a few people who do follow the New Age beliefs. I am quite willing to enter into discussion with anybody who does follow New Age beliefs if they do want to stick to discussion and they do want to actually back up their beliefs with the teachings within the scriptures and the teachings within the Hermetic principles and other esoteric knowledge. However, when the discussion is reduced to nothing more than personal attacks on me because they do not like the information I am relaying, then that discussion will be ended and that person will be removed and their comment will be deleted. So let's have a look at the 7 Hermetic principles, and in particular, let's focus on the principle of polarity and what it does say about good and evil, and if good and evil are the same thing. And so if we look at the principle of polarity, it goes on to say that everything is dual, and that means that duality does exist. And so this is a misconception that is often perpetuated in the New Age movement, that nothing is basically dual, that everything is one and there is no such thing as duality, and that good and evil are the same thing. And so straight away we can see that the very first teaching within the principle of polarity tells us that everything is dual, that everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, and like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes may be reconciled. Now what happens is, because they come across this part here that says like and unlike are the same, they basically then attribute that to everything being the same instead of everything being dual. And so we can relate this to where the principle of polarity goes on to illustrate the differences in degree of opposites, and how even though they are opposites, they still reconcile and meet in the middle. And they give a example of a thermometer. And so they basically go on to say that even though hot and cold are opposites, they are really the same thing, and they are merely just different degrees of the same thing. So if we use this example and we look at hot and cold, would you actually go and put your hand in boiling water? Even though hot and cold are different degrees of the same thing, would you go and put your hand in boiling water? And so we can see that even though hot and cold are different degrees of the same thing, there are polarities. And those polarities, which relate to the extremes on the spectrum, do not mean that hot and cold are exactly the same thing. And this is how we can relate good and evil. Just because good and evil relate to behavior and they're different degrees of human behavior, it does not mean that evil is good and good is evil, and that they are both exactly the same thing. And so I would suggest that people who follow the New Age movement look into Hermetic sciences in a more neutral way, and basically look to the information, not to actually support your beliefs and the beliefs that you already have, but to actually learn about the universal laws under which we are governed, and take that information as it is given. Do not try and manipulate that information to fit into something which you choose to believe because it sounds pleasing to the ear. And this is what a lot of people use esoteric knowledge for. They use it as a crutch. And esoteric knowledge should not be used in that way, because it really will not benefit you if you are not actually looking at the information and studying and reflecting on the information in the correct way and in an intellectual way. If you just want to use this information as a way to justify your own beliefs, then you really are not going to benefit from esoteric knowledge at all. So now that we can see that the principle of polarity does not actually support the belief that good and evil are exactly the same thing, let's have a look at what the scriptures actually relate when we are looking at whether we have a responsibility to speak out against evil, and whether we have a responsibility to give a voice to those who have no voice. You know, especially children who are very innocent. And we know that there are innocent children who are suffering all over the planet at the moment, especially in areas where they are experiencing war. What you will actually find is a lot of people that adhere to the New Age movement and the beliefs of the New Age movement do so because they have the privilege of living in a Western country in which conflict has not yet reached their actual own environment. And so they do have the privilege of having these beliefs in which they do not have to speak out against evil and they do not have to acknowledge evil, because evil has not yet touched their own environment, their own physical environment. They have not felt evil in a physical way in their environment. And so they do have this ability to ignore evil and to ignore the negative effects of people who are using their positions of power, like the Jesuits, to enact evil on others who do not have a voice and do not have power and are not in a situation to speak out for themselves. And so the times in where people can actually just pretend that these situations are only happening in other places and will never actually affect them is coming to an end. And these people will soon understand that evil will indeed touch their lives and they will feel evil within their environment, even if it hasn't actually happened as yet. That by standing aside and saying nothing about evil and being apathetic in the face of evil will not benefit them in the end. And so let's have a look at the Gospel of Thomas, and we see that verse 16, Jesus said, "Perhaps people think that I have come to cast peace upon the world. They do not know that I have come to cast conflicts upon the earth, fire, sword, war. For there will be 5 in a house, there'll be 3 against 2, and 2 against 3, father against son, and son against father, and they will stand alone." Now we can also see another translation of that same text, and it goes on to say, Jesus said, "Many of you think that I have come to establish peace in the physical realm. I will not bring peace, but dissension, fire, sword, and war. Families will be divided because of me. Friends will stop associating with one another, and nations will join in battle. Yes, those who would follow me must be willing to forsake everything and to stand alone if they would inherit the realm of my parents." And so when we look to the interpretation of this verse and what the actual information is that is being related in this verse, we are basically being told that as we descend in the ages, there will be a time where things will be very violent and there will be a lot of dissension and there will be war and there will be a lot of negative events, and basically these times will be our tests, and we are not to just sit in apathy. We are not to just sit on the fence and be neutral. We are to speak out and to not stand in agreement with evil, but speak against evil. And this will cause a division in our families, and we will be deserted by our friends. And it is not an easy position to be somebody who is standing up and speaking out against what everyone is accepting. But if we are to be in possession of an understanding for the truth and for this knowledge, then we must be prepared to stand alone regardless. And so this basically relates to, we are not to stand in apathy. These are parts of our tests, and we must stand up and speak out regardless of the consequences, regardless of whether we are disowned by our families and our friends no longer want to associate with us. Now, if we have a look at some of the other scriptures, we can also see it is very clear that we are to speak out against evil and we are to actively fight and combat evil and all of the root causes of evil. And we can see this in the Colburn manuscripts and the Egyptian texts of the Bronze Book. It goes on to say that if evil be established by the sword, then it is because the swords of the good lack strength and numbers. Those who petition the great God for help must be sure they have lacked nothing in their own preparations. They must fight strength with strength, and where they lack numbers, then they must fight with subtlety. But above all else, they must fight. This is the law they have ignored, and their woe-begotten lamentations are a stench to the Most High. And then it also goes on, another verse in the Egyptian text of the Bronze Book. He who dedicates his life to me gives shelter to the homeless and succours those in distress. But even these are not the ultimate in goodness, for they are passively accepted. The ultimate in goodness is to actively combat all the root causes of evil. Those who are my true followers live a life of service and goodness. They live in harmony with their neighbours, harm none, and do not shirk the burden and obligations of earthly existence. And so basically, even though we do not go out of our way to cause conflict and to cause any harm to anybody, we do not stand in apathy when we see evil. We have to fight and combat all the root causes of evil. We have to speak out against evil, and we have to give those who have no voice a voice. We have to give those who have no strength. I would ask those who believe that apathy is righteous. If your village was being attacked, if your children were being killed, if your women were being raped, would you just stand there in apathy because it's all just part of the grand plan? It's all just part of the divine plan, and good and evil are the same. And so you just think you can stand there in apathy and do nothing? Is that what you believe? Because that belief is not supported in any of the esoteric knowledge or any of the teachings. Another verse from the Egyptian text of the Bronze Book. He who turns from the rags of the destitute and ignores the pale cheek of the hungry smites his sensitive soul with paralyzing blows. It is a matter for wonder that it becomes dead and insensitive, unfeeling and unresponsive. If for no other reason, have compassion for your own sake, for it molds your greater form in a greater everlasting, I'll do that one again. If for no other reason, you have compassion for your own sake, for it molds your greater form in a glory everlasting. While one man groans in misery, in the habitations of poverty, or there remains one grey head bowed with distress to dumbly plead for aid, how can you go your way unmoved by compassion, dissipating your time and substance in unprofitable enjoyments? You who indulge in vain pleasures unfeelingly, while others want and suffer, will someday eat your heart out in the dark barrenness within the gloomy cave, haunted by bitterness and regret. And also another one from the Egyptian text of the Bronze Book. I will not hide my contempt for the workers of wickedness and servants of evil, and though they may be in seats of the mighty, I will accord them no respect. I will never commend that which is wicked. Then in the Celtic text of the Cole Book, the rallying call has sounded, and it echoes in every responsive heart. Arm yourself for the fray with the God-given powers within. Align them to fight on the side of good. The call has gone out, and the inner forces of every real man are required to rally to the cause of humankind. And also the Bible. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth and judge righteously. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. And take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but expose them instead. And then we can have a look at some of these quotes by philosophers and those who have studied the esoteric knowledge and understand it to the level required in regards to the difference between good and evil and our responsibility to mankind. And it goes on to say that no middle course is possible. Every man is either good or bad. The indifferent, the lukewarm are not good. They are consequently bad, and the worst of all the bad, for they are imbecile and cowardly. The battle of life is like a civil war. Those who remain neutral betray both parties alike and renounce the right to be numbered among the children of the fatherland. That's from Eliphas Levi. And then we've got Dante. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in times of great moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. This one is from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And in keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it. It will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age, we are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath the new generations. Again, showing that we definitely do have a responsibility to speak out against evil and that evil exists. Saint Catherine of Siena, we've had enough of exhortations to be silent. Cry out with 100,000 tongues. I see that the world is rotten because of silence. Ariel Bar Tesdock, those who do not take a stand against evil will in the end be overcome by it. Those who tolerate evil in their midst will eventually tolerate evil in their hearts. Those who are silent before evil will in the end be silenced by evil. And lastly, John Stuart Mill, a person may cause evil to others not only by his actions but by his inaction, and in either case he is justly accountable to them for the injury. So as you can see, the scriptures and the teachings actually do not support the belief that evil and good are the same thing, or that we are righteous in our apathy, and that we do actually have a responsibility to speak out against evil, to speak out against these evil organizations like the Jesuits who have taken control of our governments and our religious organizations and hide behind these organizations to enact their negative behavior all around our planet. And so the belief that we are just basically able to stand back and say nothing and do nothing is just not supported in the teachings or the texts. And the principle of polarity does not support that good and evil are exactly the same things. So I would basically invite any discussion from people who follow these New Age beliefs. However, if the discussion does reduce to one of personal insults and personal attacks, then you will be deleted, you will be removed. My channel is for those who are seeking the truth, who are seeking an understanding of the knowledge, and even if the information is something that is not something that is a pleasing thing to the ears, a lot of the information in the esoteric knowledge is not pleasing to the ears. It does actually give us the understanding that we are not just complicit in evil, we are not just apathetic bystanders. You know, walking the middle path is not about just being apathetic and sitting on the fence. Walking the middle path means that we don't take sides when we see conflict in situations such as politics, when we know that arguing is futile because both sides are just two sides of the same coin. These are the situations in which we walk the middle path, not when we actually see evil being perpetuated around our planet, where we see children suffering at the hands of evil, and where we have a responsibility to speak out against what is happening and to give those who have no voice a voice. This is where we do have to stand up. This is where we do have to actually speak out, even if it does mean that people around us do not want to hear what we have to say, and it could actually result in us being an outcast within our family and being an outcast within our circle of friends. What we have to actually do is care more about the truth and care more about doing the right thing than appeasing those around us and caring more about our popularity. Well, I'll leave it here and I will post all of the links underneath. And as always, peace out.